here to quickly introduce and also welcome the speakers here. So a very interesting session, as I said, on data decisions and how they kind of work together, what's already out there, how they can support. So my role here is minor, is just to introduce, and then Wayne from AWS will give a presentation. Then we also have well, we have Andrea from Belfast, Bart from Ghent. Everybody will just introduce themselves. Just to give a bit of the context there, so we've been organizing roundtables on data sharing, or at least when I assume I can mention that as the context for this session as well. So we've been organizing roundtables on data sharing with some of our cities, supported by AWS, to kind of find out, okay, what are the main blockers, right? So what are, and not kind of impose anything, just listen to the conversation and see, okay, what is, you know, stuff that's moving, because it's something that everybody, I think, to an extent, sees needs to happen, but not every, you know, path is as clear as it should be. It's an ongoing kind of conversation, investigation. The idea is that we, after the roundtables, this session, that we'll have another kind of follow-up with the network that will ultimately result in a white paper, which is based on then the insights of all the cities who've participated, which we're aiming for somewhere later in the year. And then to share that so that everybody kind of knows. So if you have any questions or comments or things like that from the audience, do feel free to put them in. Let's, you know, kind of continue the work also while we listen to the great speakers here. So I won't eat up too much of your time. I think I had my share. So without any further ado, Wayne, please take the floor, and show's yours for a while. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you, Laurent, and thank you for having us, inviting us here today. We are, you know, really honored to be kind of part of the OS program as an enterprise kind of organization in your enterprise program. And as you'll see in my presentation in a moment, you know, we kind of understand the trust and weight of their responsibility that comes with joining OS as an enterprise organization. And, you know, myself and my team will work kind of tirelessly along with OS to ensure that we kind of continue to earn their trust with kind of cities, councils, districts, regions, communities from kind of around the globe. So yeah, let's get straight into it. I'm going to share my screen, and one sec. Great. So yeah, as you'll one of the things I wanted to just well, let me go. So my name's Wayne Soutter. I work for AWS. In terms of kind of Andrea and Bart, in terms of introductions, let's do those in a moment when we come to the kind of fireside chat event. So I work for AWS, and my role is business development for IoT and smart cities. I'm sure some of you will recognize this picture on my screen. And it's a picture of Singapore. And the reason I use it as my opening slide is that it reminds me of their approach to government and citizens. In some Eastern cultures, the sun, as might be expected, as that's where the sun rises, plays an important part in this epitome of yang, representing the light, heat, vitality, spring. The sun has been used as a symbol to represent emperors and governments as the center of the universe around which the community revolves. But more recently, Singapore's changed that model, and now they describe their citizen as the sun and center of the universe, around which kind of government services revolve. And we're starting to see that pattern emerge around the world, where cities, regions, councils are starting to put their citizen at the center of everything they do. And this approach is actually surprisingly similar to one of our core principles at Amazon. Since opening our virtual doors in '95, the retail business Amazon.com has had the single-minded goal to be Earth's most customer-centric company. And that early day goal is still 15 years later our core focus within AWS, with our key leadership principle to be customer obsessed. So, and everything we do, it kind of revolves around that principle in a very real way. And so when we look at cities as our customer, we recognize that the city too has a customer and that they are obsessed with, and that's the citizen. And every decision a city takes is designed in some way to benefit or enrich that citizen's life in some way, whether that is to maintain or grow real estate values, bring in new business, increase tourism. It's all driven with that end customer, the citizen, in mind. But in order to make good educated decisions, they need to make it on data, which brings me to a definition of smart places. So, whether you're a smart city, a smart district, region, whatever you are, in order to be a smart organization, you need to be making data-driven decisions. But in order to do that, these organizations need to have control and ownership of their data. And that's going to be the core kind of focus of my presentation today. We've developed a program called the Veracity program, and it's got a number of steps, and I'm going to be talking through those in a moment and explaining how, if you're interested, how you can maybe get involved. But reflecting back on some of the challenges, and I'll be talking with Andrea and Bart about those in a little while. I am continuously surprised at how complex the space is in these kind of public sector organizations. Lots of standalone data sets, lots of siloed teams where sharing data internally is a challenge. Data governance is an issue because of those issues. Vendor data, these are the two big ones: vendor data lock-in and attracting and retaining skills. Being able to get access to data that perhaps, long-term contracts where the vendor's holding that data makes it really tricky to get access to that data. And increasingly, I get feedback from cities saying, getting the right skills, being able to attract them in. And that'd be one of the questions we'll talk about on the fireside chat in a bit. I'll be fascinated to get, the take on the speakers in that. And then even if we can attract those skills in, how do we retain them? How does a city afford to be able to kind of pay the fees that some of the kind of bigger enterprises are charging out there? Paying out there for those skills. And also open data is a big thing. How do we open data? And Andrea's very experienced now. I'll talk about that in a bit. And lastly, how do cities and these organizations, how do they get value from their vertical data? And I'll talk about more of that in a moment. And the common thread in all of those is data. And at AWS, that's all we do. We help organizations manage data. And it's worth saying at this point that at AWS, we don't have access to customers' data. All we do is provide a service where we provide hardware and software services for organizations to be able to use and get value from their data. And so I'll go into more detail on the cross-vertical analytics. So just a bit of an example here. So a lot of organizations we find have lots of standalone data sets, sometimes even master data sitting on individual computers or individual servers, and then often buying in what we would call vertical data solutions. So maybe it's in the UK we have something called council tax, or maybe it's a council tax application flowing into the supplier's maybe cloud store, and the supplier supplying some kind of dashboard or visualization into that. So this entire solution can be easily procured. That makes it really attractive to buy. But what it does is it makes it hard if you want to take some data that you've got internally and map it, or use some analytics or machine learning across that, and maybe some IoT data flowing in too with another provider. So being able to map those data stores across each other can be challenging. At best, you might have API access into that data, or at worst, in many cases, we find they don't have access at all. And so we talk to cities about moving increasingly over time towards the cloud. And this is not an overnight thing you can do. This is a medium to kind of long-term roadmap that the city needs to engage on. And I use the term carefully here, kind of your cloud. Now, obviously, we'd love it to be, to work with yourselves and AWS, but this approach should be something cities are doing irrespective of which kind of cloud provider they choose. If if cities can move more of their data to the cloud, it really allows them to do a lot of those things we talked about earlier. It really kind of gets rid of lots of those hurdles, and it makes their data truly portable. To be able to migrate from one cloud provider to another cloud provider is relatively straightforward. They're very, very kind of clear migration paths to be able to move between kind of cloud providers. Now, for some of your data, you may leave it with your trusted suppliers. You may have your CRM system, or maybe it's your council tax. And so you go, no, that data we're going to leave with our trusted suppliers. But then we help cities understand what API access to put in place to get the access to the data that they need. For other suppliers, maybe it's a small IoT provider, maybe that data kind of flows into your cloud. And then building APIs, especially mapping them back to the OWASP MIMS, being able to then open that up to other cities or other providers. Your suppliers still playing a full role in supplying the dashboard, supplying the applications and the connectivity, but increasingly over time, being able to take more control and ownership of your data in your cloud. Now, I'll just touch here very quickly on our reach. And so if this is something you're interested in talking about with us, just to say that we've got, the beauty is that AWS has kind of global coverage. So we've got, regions and availability zones in most of the countries around the world, and we have a real kind of strength across Europe. And I just want to quickly touch on here on sustainability. It's often raised, and sustainability is really close to my heart. In fact, about 4 years ago, I personally changed my eating habits to have less of an environmental impact on the planet. But in terms of AWS, the best example I can provide of why it's more efficient to run on AWS than local data centers is, if you can imagine, when you go home at night and you shut the doors on your office, the servers at your data center are still on, producing heat and sitting there in case you maybe need to, let's say, check your emails at night. But at AWS, our servers are used by millions of customers around the globe. So when you're not using a server at night, someone else in the world is using it, which means it's highly efficient. And at AWS, our scale and focus on innovation allows us to improve efficiency faster than standalone enterprise data centers. Infrastructure that, according to a 451 research, it's a research organization, they did some research, and infrastructure that AWS runs is 3.6 times more energy efficient than your average enterprise data center. And when you combine our continuous focus on efficiency with renewable progress, customers can achieve up to 88% reduction in carbon emissions over the internal data centers. And AWS is on track to be 100% renewable energy by 2025. So why do this? Why bring, why kind of get control and ownership of your data? Well, the research houses call it to get a single view, and whether that's a single view of your citizens or your transport or your infrastructure, the idea is to be able to get insight and be able to make decisions based on that data. And I've absolutely find this fascinating. So Leeds in the UK is a kind of a medium-sized city. And when we were working with them, we realized that they have over 500 different data sets that they have to manage within their business. And here's the really fascinating thing, is they have to deliver 1,050 different services with those 500 data sets. And I find this really interesting because can you even name for me a commercial organization that delivers over 1,000 different services or even 1,000 different products? And so it's incredibly challenging for our public sector organizations and cities and councils to be able to manage their business on the limited resources they got. And this, what we call a data wheel, is just an example of some of the kind of data sets that these organizations have to manage. But the beauty is you don't have to have all of that on day one. As I say, it is a road to go down. But in the beginning, with just a few data sets, you can do incredible things. And I've got a couple of examples I'd like to go through here. So Transport for London or TfL, London's main transport operator, they opened up some data. And on the back of that, we've now, the latest reports last year by an independent third party, they reported that there's now 8,000 developers developing on the back of this data that Transport for London opened up. And this created 360 mobile applications that the citizens use. And here's the really interesting thing. They estimate that it generates $200 million of value for the London economy every single year, just by Transport for London opening up their data. So it's a wonderful example of how cities and councils can get value just by opening up their data. And that's, I think, why we're so excited to work with OASC on being able to help cities kind of really do a lot more of that. Another simple example, Waltham Forest, a council, they used 3 different data sets, some open source, some internal data, and using that were able to determine whether their social workers, when they were doing home visits, whether they could do those home visits as a lone worker by themselves, or whether in fact, based on this data, they should go and do that home visit in a team, as it's maybe not safe enough for them to do that home visit as a lone worker. Copenhagen, has done some amazing stuff. They're really kind of a lighthouse on how to kind of use data. And they used a couple of open source data sets and also used some mobile data that they bought from the mobile phone providers. And using that, they're able to understand how visitors move around the city in different kind of weather conditions and different times of the year, and therefore able to guide their business community on how to target those visitors better, depending on the weather. And then finally, Hackney. So Hackney is a council in London. And I used this example because it's one of the strongest examples I've seen of how they were really able to, at the start of COVID, because they had the core foundations of data management in place, they were able to move really, really quickly. And they were able to use 7 different data sets and identify that they had 970 households who needed immediate adult social care support at the start of COVID. So to really help them to be able to understand where to focus their limited resources on. And so this is, these organizations, to be able to do these kind of things, we've created this thing called veracity, and this is the kind of veracity journey. So it starts with putting in place some foundations. And this is about putting in place some technology infrastructure to allow you to build long-term on. So it's about being able to bring data in, capture or migrate data in and visualize it quickly. And these first 3 steps over there, we'd be open to work with you as an organization. It depends which kind of countries you're in, but we'd be interested to talk to you about running a program with a partner and being able to do these first 3 steps, perhaps free of charge, depends where you are based. And that can very quickly, over a 3-month period, be able to highlight for you the value that you can get by moving your data to the cloud. And we're talking about just 2 or 3 data sets, being able to move it to the cloud and visualize that. You'll quickly start to understand how efficient that is and how quickly you can get value from that. On the back of that, we can start doing some more advanced things, whether that's RPA or robotic process automation, risk mitigation, or predictive modeling. There are a range of things we can then build on from there. And then we can look at more of a growth phase. We can look at how do you maybe commercialize or democratize your data, using the OASC MIMS or using some of AWS has OGS, which is just an open platform that encourages cities and councils to be able to share their source code, share their policies and procedures with other cities around the world. And we host that all kind of free of charge. We've also got an open data platform where we share a huge number of data sets that we host on behalf of other kind of NGOs so that organizations can access that open data free of charge. But a big part of this growth phase will be skills and training. And it's about, how do we empower cities? How do we really get their teams to understand, the value of moving to the cloud and being able to make good decisions on that? And so we really focus here on, kind of getting the city's internal teams up to speed on cloud. And then lastly, how does AWS play a real part of your community? How do we work maybe with your schools or your education programs or your colleges? And how do we, try and bring some of our education programs in there to make the students of today the cloud architects or the CDO of the city tomorrow? And in the business community, how we've got lots of innovation programs and growth and acceleration programs. And how do we use those to maybe attract in those startups, the 8,000 developers that Transport for London have? How do we maybe help you try and attract in some of those communities into your community, maybe on the back of the data that you are opening up using kind of the OS mums? So that's it from me. I'm going to pause there. But if this is interesting to you, happy to, if you want to drop me an email, and we can kind of get in touch and just talk about what's possible and how we can maybe help you kind of do more with your data. So I'm going to pause there. I'm going to stop sharing over there. Great. And
thanks, Wayne. If I could just kind of do a short reflection.
yeah.
Okay, good. So yeah, great presentation. I think kind of the list of things that AWS can do in that type of environment is quite impressive. It's a lot of capability. I think also the fact that we've of course been talking for a while now, and we know each other also from other days and this and that. But the fact that AWS kind of becomes an enterprise partner of OASC is also a testament to kind of a commitment to transparency, openness, engaging on kind of the terms of the cities and so forth. And of course we applaud that, because with that, that coupled to the capabilities, of course, creates opportunity for scaling, for lowering costs in digital transformation and so forth. However, there are cities, kind of city stakeholders who, of course, because it's a cloud environment, it's something that's not visible, not tangible locally. Concerns over what happens to the data. Does it, for example, we got a question in the chat saying, hey, does it kind of leave? I assume it's a EU city or city representative or something asking, hey, does it leave the EU? Does it leave the economic area? Yeah. What happens to the data? What kind of what's used globally? What happens? So can you elaborate a bit on that, because it seems to be
absolutely.
A question, a concern.
Yeah, thanks, Tova. Yeah, absolutely, and it's a very, very common question. And the simple answer is, you genuinely have absolute complete control of your data. So you choose where, which region, so which essentially, for the sake of this conversation, which country you want to kind of put your data in. Just for the sake of this, let's say it's Frankfurt. So if you put your data in Frankfurt, it absolutely stays in Frankfurt. It never leaves Frankfurt. You have complete control of that data in terms of where it goes and who gets access to it. And you also, the beauty is, you've got the ability to encrypt that data. So you can, at the click of a button, encrypt that data, and no one in the world can get access to that data. But the point is that, yeah, you put it in the region that you want, it stays there. We never move it without your permission. We've got the FBI using our services. We've got global banks using it. We've got cities, military organizations. It's been interesting. I've been with AWS just more than, in fact, going on almost 2 years now. And it's been fascinating being inside, because you really start understanding how that scale brings security, because we've got a huge number of security consultants, an unimaginable number, because we are identifying all of the possible threats that are kind of coming our way from around the kind of globe. And so we're, we are magnitude safer than possibly a private organization or public sector organization kind of trying to do it with a medium-sized team. So yeah, but to reassure you, your data absolutely stays wherever you put it.
Okay, cool. So I'm getting comments as a trickle effect. So I'll see later if we have any further.
Fantastic.
So I'll kind of pass the word back to you for the intros with Belfast, Ghent, and so forth.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Thanks, Will. Right. Moving on to the fireside chat. So I'm incredibly grateful. We have two fantastic kind of experts in the field. With Andrea Thornbury and Bart Rosseau from so Andrea from Belfast and Bart Rosseau from Ghent joining us today. Andrea, do you want to do a quick intro of yourself, and I'll hand over to Bart, and then we can kind of get cracking with some discussion.
Sure, no problem. Hi, everybody. I'm Andrea Thornbury. I'm the data specialist in the City Innovation team in Belfast City Council. We're responsible for the development and delivery of the Smart Belfast programme that's been rolled across the city, but also the digital pillar of the Belfast Region City Deal. And that City Deal includes 5 other councils, our universities, our Belfast Harbour, and our Catalyst programme as well. And so it's got a wider remit than the Smart Belfast framework. And through that, I'm developing 2 data foundations for the city, an urban data platform and a citizen office of data analytics. And my background, as Wayne mentioned earlier, is very much open data. I established the first open data project and portal in the island of Ireland. And we also were the first Open Data Institute node as well. And I was on the Open Data Strategy Steering Group. So I'm only in the council 2 years. So I was that person outside of the council that was trying to get every piece of data out of the council. And now I'm that person in the council trying to drive the data programme forward.
Bart?
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. So I'm Bart Rosseau. I work for the city of Ghent in Belgium. I'm head of the data and information unit, where we do also we manage the open data portal. We do general data management, which evolved from the traditional GIS team. We also do data analytics. The data protection officer is part of our team. So it's quite a broad assignment. But the most interesting thing that is happening since the new board of mayors and vice mayors, which went into office in 2019, in their initial document policy statement, they said we need Ghent to become data driven. And to make this operational, this was assigned to our team. So now we're in the process of finding out how can we make the organization as a whole more data mature, which there's a lot of challenges in the IT field, but also even more so in how do we need to organize ourselves to make better use of data. So yeah, an interesting journey, to say the least.
That it is. What Bart also didn't say is that he's been a lifelong civil servant for more than 26 years, despite his age, because he looks like he's 28, doesn't he? But he's also participated in several kind of EU-funded projects like Horizon 2020. So, Andrea and Bart, I'm really grateful to have you join us today. So thank you for kind of bringing the experience and taking time out of your schedules and children's learnings as we all kind of grappling with at the moment. But if I could open with a kind of first question. In discussions with a number of cities in the past 12 months, I've heard them suggesting that often it's kind of, it was a real surprise that COVID was an accelerator in their technology adoption. Is that what you experienced? How's COVID kind of impacted your use of data, both positively or perhaps negatively? Andrea, do you want to kick off?
Thanks, Wayne. Yes, absolutely. It's the same in Belfast. COVID has definitely kickstarted a lot of conversations around data and digital. And actually, in relation to the citizen, we're hearing citizens talk more about their data, the COVID apps, data privacy, what's going to happen to that data, how long will governments hold this data. So it's actually really brought data to the fore in relation to our citizens. And we have, as a council, we really do value our data, but we've seen the value of our data more so as we responded to the COVID pandemic. And that includes running a number of emergency responses to support the most vulnerable in our society, And we also realized that our data on its own wasn't enough to fully do that. So we have a number of data collaborations, some with our voluntary and community sector organizations, our third sector, because they actually are the ones that interface the most closely to our citizens, but also with our universities and in some cases some private sector too. And what we did find is, there tends to be a view sometimes in public sector that data is collected for a one-dimensional purpose, but actually the value of that data in responding to something like a pandemic or a crisis, has really highlighted the value and what more we can do with our data. But in terms of our response, the City Innovation team developed an initiative called COVID Connect NI. And how that came about was, through our relationships with our SMEs and our industry, we were hearing time again with the downturn as a result of COVID, they had a surplus of resources, of skills, of capacity that they would be able to support, whether it was voluntary community organisations or the council or other public sector bodies to deliver emergency COVID-19 services. And from that, we were like, well, how do we broker that? How is it that we are going to connect these experts in data and digital to public sector and to voluntary community sector? Because those relationships in some cases had never, evolved before. So working with the local tech company Expand, we developed a digital platform, very, very quick turnaround in 4 weeks, where we matched the digital expertise, capacity and resources of our innovator community with those organisations that were delivering those services. So it was a hugely successful project. We had a really, really great response to it. But one of the things we were really clear of, we had the digital, but where was the data in this conversation? And for a lot of voluntary community organisations, they may not have had a dedicated data person in their organisation or even a dedicated digital person. In some cases, some of these organisations were purely volunteer run. And so, we realised very quickly that for a relationship like this, for services like this, for COVID response, data was the cornerstone of this. So we developed a data resource on that digital platform that not only highlighted the open data resources that were available for them to pull on, but also provided them with examples of best practice for data sharing, what they needed to consider for data privacy, what they needed to consider for a data relationship or a collaboration. And then we also, I already had very strong links with the Northern Ireland Government's Open Data team, so the Department of Finance's Open Data Strategy team. And we worked with them to build a sort of a conduit where if a request came in for data, that request would be processed quickly. It's not always processed quickly in public sector, but basically trying to get the data, the essential data required to the organisations delivering the services on the ground. So that, that combined digital data resource really fundamentally, supported our SME community, supported our universities in their research into COVID, and supported the delivery of essential services in public sector and voluntary community sector. But it was cemented by the data provision that was provided as well. So we really were happy with the impact of that project. Hope I answered the question.
Yeah, that's great. It's fascinating how those voluntary organisations have data, but they just don't have the expertise sometimes to be able to kind of share it out. And yeah, I mean, that'd be interesting in terms of the data project that you're doing, how we can kind of use that to kind of leverage some of those data sets. But on your side, how's COVID kind of impacted Ghent? Looks like we might have lost Bart there for a sec.
Bart, are you? Oh, we lost Bart, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, so maybe I could, because I was going to kind of jump in with a case, so maybe I'll do that while we wait for Bart. Is when the pandemic was just breaking out of in Europe. Of course, Italy, I think, was one of the countries that they had like 2.5 weeks of a head start, right? So I kind of got in touch with the people we know there, and the team from engineering who've been working with us on all kinds of projects. They have this cloud-based platform where it was before that it was used for like air quality data, mobility, all kinds of dashboarding in a city context. But because I had that capability and it was like there on the cloud, right? They could. I think in a week and a half or 2 weeks, they whipped up a system that would connect the you know, like house private doctors. I don't know the exact so your house doctor, as we say in Belgium, to the testing centers, to the regional task forces, and they would have this overview because there's the regions who manage health, right? So within a week and a half, 2 weeks, they had this overview and could start acting, you know, and getting ahead of this pandemic. And it was in one region. And if you compared how it was performing in the heat of that pandemic, you know, it was, you know, doing better than the other ones, especially considering the kind of how close it was to the worst affected regions. I think it was second or third affected region. It's a long time ago. I apologize. I wasn't planning on sharing that, but it to me it was just a testament of like how cool it can be, right? I mean, if you have the stuff set up already and you can build an app in 2 weeks, and I'm certain they've saved lives, and not a small amount, right? Because they were hit hard. Everybody was kind of flying blind. Yeah. I think it was a really great case. It's written up a couple of times. If you search for it, I think we did a post on it, or I have a link. Well, if you're interested in it, get in touch. We can send the link as well. It's a pretty interesting one. Bart, I see you're back. I didn't mean to kind of eat your time, but I was kind of making conversation a little bit. Yeah, thanks. All right.
The master at work.
Exactly. So yeah, boss. I guess, yeah. Coming back to that question, how did COVID impact yourselves at Ghent?
Well, we were facing 2 waves in the crisis. So at the end of March in Belgium, we had our first lockdown, and at that time I was eagerly awaiting the data questions from the policymakers and the management. But they didn't come because the whole organization was focused on, okay, what is vital? What do we need to organize? How do we face the digital gap? Because there's different areas where the digital tooling isn't as mature as in other areas. So. And we could support by supplying the data we had. We had the socioeconomical profiles and so on, so to support the decisions. But then we were using what was there and what was tested. So I don't think that you can transform during a crisis, because your bandwidth is very limited. So you focus on what needs to be there. Then by the end of May, early June, when we started relaxing some of the measures, the data questions started trickling in. Okay, if we want to communicate, what is possible where? How can we make this visual? How can we make good use of the map? So there are expertise from the data side. We could use what was there again. And then, because in your intro, Wayne, you were talking about making better use and take control of the data. We realized a lot longer than the crisis, but it became very apparent how much of the vital data that you need as local policymaker are not under your control, and you are very dependent from other data suppliers, especially in Belgium, where we have an interesting governmental framework with a lot of different responsibilities. In the end, all those data need to be filtered and trickle down to the local level where you can make use of it. So as the second wave started emerging, we were very focused on that. How can we make, how do we need to build insights on those different data sources while being compliant to the GDPR and so on and so on. So since July, there's 1.5 people from my team working full time on getting the data right on a daily basis and a weekly basis to monitor the situation. So it's very interesting. So my take on this is a crisis makes very visible which areas need to be tackled first. But if you need to take time after the crisis to, okay, what are the takeaways, and then you do the transformation.
Oh, well, thank you. That's really interesting. Yeah, you know, it's amazing how a crisis can kind of kick people into action and make some of those kind of decisions they were kind of putting off, and some of those more difficult decisions to get things moving. So yeah, that's really interesting. So actually leading on from that, in terms of, you're saying, it's sometimes quite difficult to access some of that data, brings kind of nicely to the next kind of question, which is kind of when cities or councils or regions, or whatever you called, often hear that they have problems about kind of accessing data, i.e. kind of data lock-in. Is that something you experienced as a business? Andrea, I'll go back to you.
Hi. I think in public sector generally, data lock-in is still a challenge. And one of the things that we've done in Belfast City Council is that we've developed a data governance team to have a look at data generally across the organisation. So it sounds like data governance. It's not data governance as in, who owns it, who manages it, where it goes. It's data governance as in, let's look at the wider data ecosystem internally. And one of the things that we decided, one of the actions we decided on last year was to undertake a data maturity assessment internally in the country. So this wasn't just looking at data. I have a real strong viewpoint in this. Data in itself is only one part of the data ecosystem. You need to look at leadership. You need to look at culture. You need to look at, well, the data, obviously, our quality, our accessibility to data, where that data is stored, our data privacy, the whole, that whole collective around data in itself. Even the idea of what data is, because what data means to me as a data specialist in the council may mean something very, very different to our frontline delivery staff. So how do we even have the conversation around data? And then it was about how we analyze data, how we use it, and what our tools are. So it's the whole data ecosystem that is being reviewed. So we're about halfway through that right now. We've undertaken a data maturity assessment, a survey across a stratified representative sample of the council. And what we've done is we brought in an independent to do that. And it's not that I think that the council are fed up hearing me talk about data, but it's also good to be able to bring in an external expert who, that's able to look independently at where we are. And what we were keen to find out is through the process, we're going to host a number of workshops with a range of our staff, but it's being postponed because of COVID, because of homeschooling and lockdown. We hope to hold it at the end of February. But we want to find out of whether where are we in this? Are we a developing organisation? Are we a mastering organisation? Where are we on that, that field of data maturity, or that line of data maturity? And what we've already, in the inception started this, but we're already hearing stories of where we are mastering data. And in some ways, COVID's brought some of that to light. But there's also examples of where we can improve. And one of those things is data lockdown. So how is it that we don't have a centralised data unit in the council? There's no hub. So it's the expertise that sits within the different departments. How do we better connect? How do we, open up our data? How could we don't have a data repository. So I can't go in and have a look to say, well, what is our city and neighbourhoods collecting in terms of data? And so it's about how do we make that better? And I suppose for me, because of my role, a lot of it is the external part of what we do through Smart Belfast. We have to ensure that we're in a position where we can collaborate on data, we can share our data. And in the Smart Belfast programme, we were already doing that through pilots. We were seeing how the benefit of utilising and checking the quality and sharing our data was having on innovative small pilot projects across the city and working through city challenges. So we do know the benefit of it. We're working through the process of it. We're going to have a 3 to 5 year action plan about data. And obviously that will include the internal and external sharing of data, but also looking at the systems that host and collect our data, and whether it's a vendor lockdown or we're using open source. And we're working with our open source innovator community around that as well.
Andrea, I know it's just a quick follow-up question there. I know in kind of some of the conversations with you in the past that you've had as many challenges in accessing perhaps data that a vendor's holding as data internally. It's as hard internally as it is sometimes with externals.
I suppose that leads right back to the data maturity assessment. I have a real passion about data will only be as good as the leadership driving it. If we have our leaders and we have a culture, so like most public sector bodies, everything is risk averse. GDPR was seen across public sector as a risk rather than as an opportunity. And this brings me back to when I said to you about my mindfulness session last night. It's about what are the advantages of things, what are the positives, and utilising, the opportunities that we have. So to me, as we move forward, we have to cement the leadership and the culture. Now it is there, but it's about, you know, building on that and building the capacity of our staff as well, in terms of quite often they don't even realize that the data they work on is actually data. They see it as that, you know, piece of information that they have to put into a system. But, you know, we do have, I think this is an amazing thing for a public sector body. We're looking internally about how we operate, manage, share our data, so that we can have those better relationships with external vendors as well. So hopefully that's given you an insight.
Nice. Yeah. Awesome. Thanks. Bart, yourselves?
Yeah, we experience also this phenomenon, but it's a multi-layered story. And I totally agree with the data maturity thing and the leadership. It's also about where in the acquirement process of IT systems are people aware that vendor lock-in might ensue. There's also, lock-in can take on many forms. So it's like the 50 shades of no. And sometimes I say the art of being a good civil servant is being able to allow 30 people to say yes within half an hour. Then you can go to the next stage. So, but I think we should tackle it in a different way. Which are the crucial data sets for your role as a local government, where you cannot allow any dependencies on outside parties? And I think that this will flip the way you look at the problem, and you will look at, okay, what are the solutions? If they're as important as we think it is, we need to take control, we need to make sure the quality is right, and we need to make the good decisions on how we store these data and connect them throughout the systems. Then again, we also noticed during this crisis and before that, once you're talking about data being flowing between different governments, each with their own political agenda or different goals, that's a challenge in itself. That being said, I think becoming more data mature, that your management and your decision makers are also aware that this is a social responsibility. It makes it easier to find the right phrases in your procurement processes. Also exchanging, how do you measure vendor lock-in? Are there any ways to prevent it or predict it? Because that's a start. And that's where networks like OASC are very important, that we can have this knowledge and also have the safe space to have these confidential conversations about what is going wrong. It's a challenge that we are all facing, but I don't think there's the one solution. And I think it's 80% talking to people, and then 20% how do you make this happen.
Yeah.
Bart, just to be clear, this is being broadcast all over the world, right? Yeah, okay. Just a quick joke.
I'm aware.
Don't fess up here. Yeah, we have other fora for that. No, so one thing, and I apologize for kind of jumping in a little bit, Wayne, but well, we have a session right after this one on data for local climate action, and it's something that we're kind of seeing with cities like, okay. There is an increasing amount of commitment being asked, I think, in terms of local climate action. So, translating those kind of goals on that level. What are you doing as like Belfast? What are you doing as Ghent? Are you kind of preparing for the climate mindset, let's say, for that pivot, or the ambition to get one on a number of fronts? What's your kind of data perspective on that? I'd be really keen to hear. Relatively brief answer on that we can take into the next session would be awesome.
Thanks. I actually don't have a strong answer in that. In Belfast, we have a resilience team funded under the Rockefeller Fund. They actually have just went live with our resilience strategy for Belfast, and obviously within that was climate. I know one of the sort of themes around data very strongly, and as it is with Belfast City Council, is the citizen. So they did collect a lot of data from the citizen. They went right out to communities. So they didn't take the traditional publish a consultation on a portal and hope that somebody responds. They went right out, they collected data, they interacted with different agencies looking at what the key resilience issues are for Belfast. Flooding would be a big one for us. Belfastshire actually means, you know, the mouth of a river. And so, you know, flooding has been in the past a big issue for us. So I know that there is a lot of data collaborations on it, but actually that's not an area that I have worked on. Apologies.
No, I wasn't asking, please tell us you're ready for everything. I was just inquiring. I think, you know, it's ongoing work, and yeah.
From the Ghent side, we have a very professional department working on climate and resilience already for a long time. So they're the specialists. So what we do as a data and information team is supporting them, because it's easy to lose track of what's happening, because there's so many things you can measure. There's a huge cost because you cannot measure everything. We don't have enough sensors to cover the whole area of Ghent. So what we try to do is support them in, okay, which are the key indicators? What's the difference between environmental data, not just in climate sense, but what's happening in your city? What's the management information? Which are the more operational data? So provide a framework where they can say, okay, this is data that we need to monitor once a year. This is for reporting issues. So that's from the data management perspective. And I think one of the more visible things we did, there's within the whole sustainable development goals framework, there's this opportunity for self-reporting, and that's something we published at the end of last year. So that's good to provide that direction and to help people say, okay, how do we need to focus even on your data collection, because and also find out which is the work that needs to be done by research institutes, for which data should we look at organizations on an international level, but also how do you establish this dialogue? To which level of granularity do we need to access those data in order to make local decisions? So yeah, interesting topic.
Yeah, I think just as a short kind of follow-up before I hand to you, Wayne, to close this, we've been invited into some deep dive or data deep dives by GCOM, and it allowed us to kind of look at really this environmental perspective, but with the city's angle, but from the data side, if you kind of catch the drift there. And it really is, there's the need for the indicators to see, you know, what's the progress. But then there's also a need for data as a tool, right? And not just big cities, but all the way down the long tail. But because just like COVID, you know, climate is everywhere. It's a universal topic. Although, of course, climate the problems are different. But so I think it's a growing topic, and it's a great time of convergence. I think also between kind of different communities, actors looking at that. And hopefully that's just a kind of a general note, like the energy we have here of in the world of universally responding to a universal problem with universal tools, we can kind of take that momentum and also apply that to climate, which, yeah, it affects us differently, but it's also a universal challenge. So Wayne, if you want to maybe give some closing remarks before we jump into the next session.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks. Well, that's really interesting. So yeah, I think first I'd just like to, you know, Andrea, thank you, and Bart, thanks for bringing your experience, because, you know, it's only by kind of you sharing us, and I think that's the whole thing I love about the kind of OS kind of membership and views. It's about sharing. One way, it's about sharing experiences, about sharing learning. It's about being open. It's about, you know, kind of sharing data, and you know, it's, you know, I think it's the only way we're all going to, you know, kind of create a world that's going to kind of be better to live in, whether that's from a climate perspective or social perspective, whatever it is. So it's absolutely thrilled to kind of be part of that, and really honored to be associated with the likes of Belfast and Ghent, and look forward to kind of working with yourselves kind of going forward. So, well, thank you for kind of inviting us in, and we're absolutely thrilled and look forward to playing a part with yourselves and all of your members in the kind of coming year.
Thanks, Wayne, Andrea, Bart, for being in the session.